Welcome to the PurePost Knowledge Center. My name is Ashley Powers. I'm the lead behavioral scientist, and I will be your host today. I want to thank you for tuning into this video as I cover Module 9 of the PurePost Personal Development Series. Personal Development Series Module 9 is one-on-one professional communication. The PurePost Personal Development Series is a portfolio of 30 modules designed to facilitate your employability, movement to higher levels of organizational responsibility, transition from one industry to another, and your overall workplace success. Here is the grid of the 30 modules that we are going to be performing. You can find all of these at www.purepostknowledgecenter.com. With today's webinars, we want to provide you with these outcomes. The first is we want you to be able to define different ways of communication. We also want you to understand the effective communication in the workplace. And lastly, we want you to learn communication techniques through listening and facilitating conversations in groups. So let's go ahead and get started. So with one-on-one professional communication, we want to talk about why communication is important. Communication is important because it's your success in leading individuals as well as building and sustaining productive relationships. It is very dependent on our ability to understand and master the communication process. So communication, as we will discuss a little bit later, is not just a one-way street. And so we need to be able to develop ourselves so that we can help develop others in their communication as well on our team. It is also important because to be fully productive leaders and team members, we need to possess strong speaking and listening skills, in which we'll talk a little bit more about later, the difference between speaking and listening and how they play into communication. So with the definition of communication, it's a giving or exchanging of information, signals, and messages. And then communication is received by either talk, gestures, or written. So in the giving and exchanging of information, signals, or messages, this can be orally, this could be written, this could be, again, received by the way that you're speaking, the way that you're moving your body, or the way that you're writing things down. I think we all can think of an example of somebody who may have written a text or an email and it was in all caps, and we could have perceived that as somebody yelling at you. So that's a way that communication can be received, written, that is not the way that it's intended. And we'll talk a little bit more about the underlying messages that happen in communication as well. So with one-on-one professional communication, the communication process is pretty simple. The sender or the speaker provides a message, and then the receiver, who is also the listener, reacts to that message. So it's about how the receiver is perceiving the message at hand and how they're looking at that message. Now, this is where things can get tricky in professional communication. You may believe that you are sending it one way and it may be perceived as another. And so we'll talk about ways that you can identify that and make sure that you correct any errors that may be occurring. So I want to throw in here real quick, we talked about DOL workplace skills. How does this pull back into our employability? Well, DOL is Department of Labor, and the basic skills that they look for in workplace skills, things that people are constantly needing, are folks who are good at reading, writing, math, listening, and speaking. Those are your basic skills in order to gain employment. Next, they want to look at the following skills as well. They want to look at creative thinking, decision-making, problem-solving, seeing things in the minds of others, knowing how to learn, reasoning, and then your personal qualities of sense of responsibility, self-esteem, sociability, self-management, integrity, and honesty. And in looking at these skills, a lot of them have communication in place, decision-making and problem-solving in particular, as well as seeing things in the mind's eye. You want to make sure that you are putting yourself into other people's shoes in order to do these things effectively. And the best way to do that is to communicate with others and see what their responses are, to see who they are. That then flows into knowing how to learn. You have to be able to not just learn about specific theories or specific guidelines that you need to process, but you have to learn about how others work in the environment so that you can communicate effectively with them as well. Some additional skills that DOL has listed recently in needing in the workplace are networking, teamwork, critical thinking, and enthusiasm. If you think about this, these are all specific communication areas. Networking isn't just networking to receive a job, but networking is also getting to know the people that you need to work with efficiently, as well as those who could potentially be clients or contractors or folks who can help you out in the future with what you're doing. It could also be networking with other folks who are in the same job as you and doing those informational interviews. And we covered informational interviews in our earlier modules, so go ahead and check that out if you want. But with the informational interviews, you want to be able to find out more about what others are doing so that you can also stay on top of your game. Same with teamwork and enthusiasm. People want somebody who is able to communicate and be able to be a part of a team and do those things that they need to do as a group as opposed to individually, so that they can continually put them on different teams and know that they can trust that things can get done. And then critical thinking as well. Again, you need to be able to look at how other people are seeing things and be able to look at it and see exactly what it is that you need to get done. So with communication, it is not just what you are saying, and this is the trickiest part. Verbal language is only one aspect, but body language, your eye contact, your posture, gestures, those are the nonverbal pieces that are huge in communication. There have been multiple studies, and it is anywhere between 70 and 90% of a message is perceived through those nonverbals. And those are, how you're acting. Are you giving eye contact? Are you providing them with what they need? Are you speaking appropriately? Are you yelling? What are those pieces? Because they're not going to get the message. They're going to hear those things or see those things as the primary. So with our nonverbals and emotions, what do we do to help with that? We want to also look at how this is more powerful than words, because it mirrors your true feelings. So I could be sitting here saying I'm not angry, but if I'm yelling at you, it's mirroring that I am upset. And that's how it will show those true feelings. It's also good to check your biases at the front as well. You may have a subconscious eye roll that you do that you're not aware of because you don't believe that, certain level of people can do the work that you're doing, or there may be something that you just don't know. We call it kind of digging deep into your icebergs, figuring out what's below the level that's making you do the things you do. So check your biases to see if there may be some nonverbals or emotions that are coming out. And then be consistent. So make sure that your communication is clear and consistent for those, but that you're also able to adapt your communication for each individual. You may have folks on your team that are needing communication to be very blunt and very to the point. Bottom line up front is often what we like to say in the military. They want the bluff and they want to know what it is right off the bat. But you may also need somebody who needs to just sit down and really hash it and hear it multiple times and get all the information several different ways to make sure they really understand it. So be consistent with how you're providing the information to the individuals on your team. So now we want to talk a little bit about listening, right? So you provide a message, and now it's the listener's responsibility to understand that message and receive that message. So how does that go across? Well, they need to have active listening. So as a communicator and as a receiver as well, you need to have a conscious effort to hear not only the words that the other person is saying, but try and understand the total message being sent. React to the message by providing information such as restating, paraphrasing, and summarizing to make sure that you're clear about what's being said. With passive listening, this is a conscious effort to hear what is being said while using few words and attentive silence. So passive listening is very different than active listening. Often I hear folks say, well, I always need to active listen, and that's not the case. Sometimes you have folks who are wanting to vent, say, about a situation. They may be in a pinch, which we'll discuss in our next module, and they want to just let you know what's happening. Having that passive listening may be what they really need. They just want you to listen without reacting, without interrupting, and to focus. So a great example of this is that I was a firm believer that my communication skills were built around active listening, and that I also needed to help solve problems. And I had a staff member come into me one day and she said, I need to tell you something, but I don't need you to solve my problem. I just need you to listen. And I had to quickly learn that I needed to passive listen because I wasn't doing that very well. So it's really looking at the situation, determining what type of listening you need to do for that communication. So now I'm going to give you an acronym for effective, active, and passive listening. We also talked a little bit about this, but now this is a way for you to kind of put it back into place. So the acronym is CAUSE. The C is for choosing. So again, choosing which is appropriate for the situation between active and passive. Attending. Just because you're doing passive listening doesn't mean that you're not attending to that person. You still need to have that good eye contact, that body posture, putting those interruptions to the side. Understanding, you still need to make sure that you understand what the conversation is about and that you know what the goal is at the end. If it's just somebody venting, let them vent. But if there needs to be a objective that needs to be met, understanding what that is as well. Next, it's selecting. Again, you want to make sure that when you're choosing that you may be starting off as passive listening, but you may need to select to go to the active listening as well. And then last, it's expressing, making sure that you are expressing any thoughts or communication pieces that you have to continue to go forward with that. And this acronym comes from the Sperry Corporation's Cause for Learning training program. So in understanding communication in groups, you want to understand how to avoid tension and defensiveness. Again, with this, you want to allow others to express their own ideas. Sometimes we'll see folks who will want to actively listen, and when they're repeating what they think the other person is getting ready to say or wanting to say, but they're not actually understanding what they're saying. So allow them to express their own ideas. Avoid getting into verbal wars. So this is those arguments, right, that happen right off the bat. You have folks who will say, well, you said that I may do this, but really you needed to say I should do this. And there's a difference between the two words. Avoid having those verbal wars so that you can make sure your words are clear and concise. Don't evaluate and judge others. It's easy sometimes when folks are talking to create that judgment, and then that's where those biases come in place that you need to put in check, especially when you're being the receiver of the message or you're sending a message. You want to make sure that the communication doesn't have judgment of the other folks that you're speaking with. And last, you want to make sure that you're sharing ideas. Make sure that everybody feels comfortable sharing their ideas in the group. Because that will help ease the tension and defensiveness of the others as well. So again, today we wanted to help you guys effectively learn the different ways of communication. So we talked about the sender and the receiver and the listening as well as the verbal and nonverbals. And then understanding the effective communication in the workplace. We discussed several pieces of knowing when to actively listen as well as when to passively listen, and then also how to check the nonverbals that you may be portraying. Lastly, we discussed learning communication techniques through listening and facilitating conversations in groups. So we talked about how to avoid that tension or any kind of defensiveness, as well as the active and passive listening through the CAUSE acronym. I want to thank you guys for tuning in today. If you have any questions or need anything, feedback, please visit us at the Knowledge Center, purepostknowledgecenter.com. And we look forward to seeing you in Module 10. Thanks, guys.